Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. It is a solo episode, and I want to talk about my client Lisa, who is in her 50s and she's eating more calories, weighs more on the scale, but has her best body composition yet. And I want to go over really some things that people over 30s, 40s, women in particular, need to focus on to change their body composition. So before I go into that, though, I just want to go over my free body recomp checklist. So within this checklist, I go over the two types of body recomp. What is body recomp? The importance of focusing on body composition, and then 10 things that you need for a body recomp, and some things that are going to help you with that. So the link to that is in the show notes. It's completely free. So make sure you go and check it out. All right. So today I'm going over my client Lisa. So she's in her 50s. She's eating more calories now. She weighs more on the scale, but she has her best body composition yet. And so I want to go over why that is. So when she first came to me, she was consuming around 1,500 calories. She was already lean and disciplined, right? Like it's not like she was in bad shape by any means. But, she just felt like she was plateaued. She wanted to continue to take her physique and performance to that next level. But she was kind of stuck on what she needed to do. And she had been, sitting around that kind of 1,500, 1,700 calorie range forever, right? And this is a common trap that I see a lot of people get themselves into is they get to this low calorie amount. And then from there, they just sort of stay there. They feel like they need to be there. But even when you're younger, that can still become problematic. But especially as we get into our 30s, 40s, and beyond, and especially for women in particular, kind of sitting in this low calorie range for extended periods of time is going to backfire and likely lead to worse health long term. And so since we've been working together, she's been eating 2,000 plus calories 90% of the time. We'll talk about what we did with her, but she's been at 2,000 plus calories 90% of the time. And as high as 2,200. And just for reference, she's 125 pounds. So it's not like she's 170 pounds. Like she's 125, small body, and being able to eat over 2,000 calories and to see an improvement in your body composition long term. Like for a lot of people, that is just something that they don't think can even happen. So I want to go over what that is. And just something she said. She's like, I just want to say I feel my body composition is different than last year at this time. I can definitely tell my legs have more muscle and definition than last year. Even arms have more definition. And then obviously looking forward to the fat loss phase to, drop some body fats there. And so I think anytime we look at changing body composition, whatever it may be, like sometimes things don't fully show up in pictures. If you can feel the difference, like that is really the most important thing here. So, all right. So for women and men in general, but we're going to take this more through a female perspective. What worked in your 20s isn't going to respond the same way once you're in your 40s and beyond, especially in your 40s and beyond, right? This is kind of that menopausal kind of time when things start to change. You can become perimenopause, sometime in your 40s, 50s, things like that. And so there's some things that happen in this period of time that are super interesting. So one, just again, because of the hormone fluctuations of menopause, and plus as we age, just a higher stress sensitivity. So things are going to be a bit more stressful on the body. So I've talked a lot about stress load on the body, and so there are just going to be just anything, whether it be life stress, mental stress, training stress, dieting stress, whatever it is. Like there's just a higher sensitivity to that, especially with hormones kind of going haywire during this period of time. And so any one thing is going to impact you a bit more unless we are prepared for that and we have strategies in place to help offset that through some of these things that I'm going to talk about here. On top of it, we also have a more disrupted / sensitive circadian rhythm as well too, which is going to lead to poorer recovery and sleep. And your body's just not going to it's just not going to run as efficiently when your circadian rhythm is out of whack. And again, there's just more sensitivity to those things, right? The body is going to have a higher sort of reaction to any little bit of circadian dysregulation. And so the most common ones are going to be caffeine intake, right? So caffeine intake, poor light exposure, and then just like a lot of stress around sleep and not getting enough sunlight throughout the day. So those are the really most common things that you'll see in terms of circadian disruption. And as I said, and even meal timing as well too, making sure that if we're going to go more carbs we probably want to have them a bit earlier in the day versus later at night. In most situations, there's always going to be some situations where some carbohydrate intake later could potentially be helpful depending on where you're at. But generally speaking, more of your meals earlier in the day there. But when that's off, again, we're going to have poor recovery in general, which means you can do less training. And now we're going to have higher stress sensitivity to any stressor that we put on our body. You could be at a higher risk of, well, poor sleep, poor recovery is going to be lower motivation. So you're less likely to make the choices that you need to make or that you want to make. Again, if we're not fully recovered, like this is going to impact body composition. You're probably not going to be able to build as much muscle. You're not going to be able to train as hard as you want to train regularly. Again, you could train hard and like it could be a perceived hard training, but if you're under recovered, you're not actually going to be tapping into that. So you're not going to be able to send the stimulus that you want to send from a training perspective. You'll also see that, when circadian rhythm's out of whack and there's some dysregulation there, our metabolism may not be as effective and efficient as it could be as well too. So we need to also look at that. You're also at a higher risk of nutrient deficiency. So you just need to make sure that we're fueling our body adequately with the right micronutrients and making sure that we're not in a nutrient deficiency in anything, right? B vitamins, vitamin D, magnesium, right? Like just a few that are, kind of coming to mind here. And so, but we are at a higher risk of this, in this age range. And this is especially true if it's paired with low calories and high training load. So if you're also trying to, be low calorie, again, you're probably not going to get all the nutrients that you need, especially the worse your diet quality is. You're trying to fit in tasty foods, you're drinking alcohol with low calories. And then on top of it, we combine it with like a high training load, a high activity amount, right? Because that's also going to deplete your micronutrients. So you kind of have three different things that are coming at: age-related, high training load, that's going to deplete it; lifestyle, so that's another one; and then obviously the fact that nutrition is off as well too. So a higher risk of nutrient deficiencies. Plus, there's just a higher protein requirement to preserve and build muscle. So our body's just less sensitive to amino acids as we age. And there's another thing I'm going to go over here. And so what that means is you likely need a bit more protein as you age. Now, we want to be careful. You could see where, now someone's like, oh, well, I need to be higher protein. They're also combining it with low calories. That's not going to be great either. So this is where low calorie amount that you're trying to hit all the time can become problematic. And so we need higher protein requirements. And most people are not getting enough protein in this age range as well too. But one of the things is like, oh, well, protein messes with my stomach. Or again, a lot of people are like, well, I gain a bunch of weight when I have protein. Probably not the protein, probably the other things that you're doing. There's other things at play, and people always just kind of pinpoint it to one thing like that. And for whatever reason, kind of protein's the one that I'll commonly see here with that. But there is, as we age, you need the right amount of stomach acid. You don't want too much. This is going to help you digest and absorb nutrients. But as we age, there is a little bit of a lowering of that. And then if you combine poor lifestyle practices, higher stress, getting circadian disruption, high training load, nutrient deficiencies, like this is going to make things even worse from that perspective. And then on top of it, if we have low stomach acid, not only are we not in something like not eating enough, micronutrition could be impacting that. Micronutrition being, fruits, veggies, things that have a lot of vitamins and minerals in them. But if we're doing that, we also have less to kind of pull from. But then on top of it, we'll typically have lower stomach acid, which is already going to make it tougher to digest and absorb nutrients. So it's kind of this double whammy where now people are not getting in the micronutrients they need. Now, so if you don't address these changes, what does that lead to? Well, one is going to lead to more gut issues. So that's going to be more bloating, more reflux, poor digestion, right? Constipation. And these are all going to lead to other issues down the line. But these are, the most common kind of things that you'll feel. It's going to lead to a harder time changing your body. Muscle gain and fat loss are both going to slow down. If we're not in the right state, fat loss is going to be tougher. Muscle gain is not going to happen, for all those things. So you're just going to have a harder time changing your body if we have micronutrient deficiencies, if our circadian rhythm's off, if we have a high stress load on the body, and we're not doing things to help lower that. You're going to have lower energy and recovery. So workouts are going to feel harder. Progress is going to feel slower. You're going to be less likely to make the choices that you want to make, right? It's like, I'm low energy. My body's not feeling great. My body's not changing. Why am I working so hard? And then that's where you're more likely to be like, you know what? Screw it. I don't want to focus on this. And, probably one of the worst of them all is going to be a higher risk of bone loss and osteoporosis. So, for women specifically, as they get to their 40s, 50s and beyond, like that is, very important and something that we need to pay attention to and focus on. So you're going to have that higher risk of bone loss and osteoporosis. And so what does this mean? You're not going to solve this by eating 1,200 calories forever. Hello, bone loss, if that's the case. Hello, no muscle gain. You're going to have a slower metabolism, no energy. You're just going to have a lot of issues that creep up there by just eating 1,200 calories forever. This also means you must manage lifestyle, training, and recovery, and not just, your macros or calories. Like you need to manage the whole thing. And if you love to train, you also need to feel like someone who trains. You can't just eat, 1,200 calories. Like you have to make sure you fuel for that training. And so here's what we did with Lisa specifically. So first, she's lifted with intent. So progressive overload, the right structure, proper execution, dialing in her execution, and just finding exercises that fit her well there. And she trains 4 days a week with purpose. So she does 4 days a week there. She does a upper lower split. She does a couple days of conditioning as well too, but she trains 4 days a week there. She's probably in that 8 to 12 kind of set range for each muscle group, maybe a little bit higher for her lower body, just because she responds well to that, and that's what she wanted there. And so again, we're lifting with intent. We need to send that signal to our body to build muscle. If you're not doing that, you're not going to build muscle. This is, a huge mistake I see people in this kind of age range make is they are not lifting in a way that's going to build muscle, right? Like their lifting is more of this kind of conditioning, Metcon, CrossFit style, which is fine from time to time. But if that's the only thing you do, it is going to be a little bit harder to build muscle. And that does have a large kind of fatigue aspect to it, which is going to be a stressor on the body. So it's a lot of kind of stress with not necessarily the greatest stimulus to actually do what we want to do. And so that's where, people can run into the ground, especially if they are training, not eating enough as well too. So that's the second thing. We fueled smarter, right? So instead of just quote unquote eating less, we fueled smarter. She likes to move a lot. So fueling enough, especially protein and carbs, has been key. And we also really worked on like getting away from just eating diet foods. We had a conversation recently where, now she's eating upwards of 2,000, 2,200 calories. She's doing a lot of like high fiber, kind of like tortilla foods, those type of diet foods that, again, when you're trying to like in a fat loss phase, those may be a bit helpful. Not necessarily a huge fan of those types of tortillas really at any time. But again, it was like, hey, we need to get in a little bit more calorie dense foods here. But for a lot of people in this sort of demographic, like anything that's calorie dense is like, oh, I need to go super low fat, super high food volume, high protein all the time. And then they end up not fueling themselves enough. And then when you try and eat more calories, they're like, well, I just can't eat that much food. It's like, well, yeah, because you're kind of in this diet mindset. Fueling enough, making sure she's getting enough protein and carbs because she likes to train. We need to make sure that she's fueling enough, improving her fat quality, right? I think that's a big thing too, is not just getting fats from like nut butters and saturated fats, but actually improving your fats, more olive oil, avocados, fatty fish, like things like that, eggs, can be helpful there. So again, making sure she's fueling enough, but also just getting away from those kind of diet foods, especially when we've increased calories. And we also phased her nutrition. So when she first came to me, she was wrapping up a fat loss phase. So she did that. But really since then, she's been in a phase where she's been at maintenance or a slight surplus. In this last fat loss phase was, 16-ish weeks there. I can't remember the exact time frame, but it was not super long. And that's the only fat loss phase she's done. And when she did that fat loss phase, she lost fat very effectively and efficiently. Someone that is, I think she got up to 128 in this last phase, somewhere to 126, 128. I mean, she got down to almost, sub 120 fairly quickly, which, when you're that low body weight, like losing that amount of body weight, like that's a pretty substantial amount. So again, her body was super effective at fat loss because she took that time away from eating 1,500 calories there. And then we were able to get back to that point for a little bit, but her body was way more responsive to it than it was previously. And that's a key, right? Like not anti-eating 1,500 calories for people or sub 1,500 calories, but it's just when you do it chronically that's where things start to add up and can become problematic. Whereas, if you phase it where, hey, most of the year we're at say 2,000, whatever that is for people, you're at 2,000, and then for a short period of time, when we're fat loss dieting, we're decreasing it. Like that's totally fine. That's not going to cause issues long term. It's when you're always trying to eat at 1,500 calories. So periodizing her nutrition has been super important for her. So here's how she did it as well. So more, we prioritize circadian rhythm and recovery. So sleep, light exposure, and stress management are dialed in. So making sure that she is regular with her sleep, looking at her caffeine intake, making sure she gets some sunlight throughout the day, and then watching her light exposure at night, and just making sure that her sleep she's feeling refreshed when she wakes up. She's not waking up regularly. If she is, then we obviously need to look into that and see what is going on there. And then stress management, like making sure she spends some time where she's not always just go, 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 right? She works full-time job. She has kids. It can be easy to just be go, go, go all the time. So making sure she's also getting that wind down or that downtime into her day. Monitoring her biofeedback. So we always check in on this weekly energy, digestion, training performance, and recovery. And that's going to dictate when we push or pull back. If any of those things get off, we need to look a bit deeper than that. Obviously stress goes into that. Where is that at? Looking at her resting heart rate, seeing where that's trending. Like, these are all things we're going to take into consideration of, like, all right, well, if this is off, digestion's starting to get off. Hey, do we need to add something in? Do we need to take something out? Do we need to focus on this a bit more? These are signs that we need to pay attention to that, because again, most people don't. And then that's where they kind of just try and push through, but their body is telling them something. It's like, hey, we need to make some sort of change here. Like, this probably isn't the best time to just keep pushing your training or pushing your calorie deficit. Like, we need to work on that, right? Calorie cycling as well too. So right now in her phase, on her off days, we have her eating about 1,900 calories, but then on her workout days, we're pushing it upwards of like 2,100 to 2,200 calories there. So again, just allowing her to eat a little bit more on her workout days, and then days maybe where she's not as like hungry, she can go a little bit lower, and that's a way to help her with her training performance, but also, minimize fat gain in this process too of gaining weight. But even calorie cycling during a fat loss phase, right? Like using it as, most days you're going to be in a deficit, but 1 to 2 days we're going to consume a bit more calories to help with the recovery side of things, right? Like, that's one thing I mentioned, is that, women in particular are going to kind of have this like higher stress sensitivity, so that, dieting, calorie deficit is a stressor on the body. So, can we manage that and dial that back, or can we offset that by, having some days at maintenance that's going to tell the body, okay, hey, we can relax, or, this isn't a long-term stressor. And that seems to help kind of lower that stress sensitivity there for a lot of people. Plus, it also, having one higher calorie day in during a fat loss phase can also help with nutrient deficiencies, right? It ensures you get that as well too. So, making sure that's in check. But then on the flip side, with her being in a phase now where we're not focused on fat loss, really prioritizing her training performance, because again, if we're feeling well fueled in our training and our training is going well, that's ultimately what's going to drive adaptation, because you're providing your body with that stimulus that it needs. Calories are important, but if we're not able to provide the stimulus that our body needs to build more muscle, it's going to be hard to do that. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where a lot of women in this age range in particular they're mentally, in their mind, they're training hard, but because they're under recovered, their body's holding them back and they're not able to actually express the amount of training that they could because of that. And then strategic supplementation, right? So this becomes super important. This is really across the board, even if you have a good diet, but I had a podcast episode on supplementing 101 and like why I think it's important to supplement with nutrients, especially in today's modern environment. And so again, we're looking at a good multivitamin, just kind of cover our bases. B vitamins being super important as well too for women in this kind of age range, especially from like the lower stomach acid that I talked about. Fish oil as well too. Legions is fantastic. That's probably the best, like in my opinion, one of the best fish oil supplements out there. Creatine monohydrate, again, for her specifically, being in this age range of 50 plus, and female as well too. Honestly, probably the most efficacious age range and gender for that supplement is women 50 plus. So definitely making sure she's taking that. Vitamin D, again, from a bone health perspective, magnesium glycinate, and then a digestive enzyme, right? So the stomach acid decreases with age. So this is especially helpful for women 40 plus. So again, if you feel like you get full on like super low amounts of food, if you feel like food just sits in your stomach like a rock after eating, like those are things that, is a sign that, hey, you probably want to add in that. Now we have to be careful with digestive enzyme. That's not something that you just want to willy-nilly just apply to everyone. Like, there's always any supplement, we have to take the person into consideration. We can't just take it because, oh, hey, Jeff said on his podcast, right? Like, we do need to look into that more, because there could be some potential downsides of taking it if they're if we don't check everything there. So I hope this was helpful. Give me some feedback on how you like this case study, and I'll do more of these with some of my clients here. Again, I think Lisa's in a spot where a lot of people are that listen to this podcast. So I hope this resonated with you. If it did, reach out to me on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. Just say, hey, this episode really resonated with me. Drop your questions. I'm sure you guys have some questions on this. So please drop them there. And then if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find it. So that's it for this episode. I'll chat with you guys soon.